The smell of sweet betelem blossoms twists through a faint breeze as tree branches towering above shake off the clinging water droplets to the moss, grass, and fungi below. Rolling roots unsettle the even ground and decaying timber reach out from below the brush. Massive boulders sit covered in mossy felt in the shade of a towering orange-capped mushroom. A four-eyed bird the size of a standard hound picks at small elemental spiderlings on a cliffside next to a raging river and waterfall that crashes down hundreds of feet below. In a green, indigo, and purple swirled sky, clouds strobe with lightning as flecks of green light flicker and fall silently like embers. Deep in the Feywild sits a valley. The gargantuan trees hollowed out and filled with life as an inn that creatures call home. Candles flicker in windows and exotic plants and vines line cobblestone walkways. A variety of homes made from organic materials bustle with life and lead to a courtyard. This courtyard expands like a spiderweb. Sylvan notes written in the cobblestone mark beautiful flowering trees with light shining through the cracks in the bark. These arborways lead to the mortal plane, each one leading to a different location with druids and fey creatures taking passage to explore or meet with old friends. The mortal plane, or as they know of it in the wild, the seed plane, was first to exist. The adjacent planes were created over time, magic echoing through space and what's in between, evolving into its own shadows and echoes, creating its own life over and over again. Not like the god-made planes of the under and above, the Feywild was created as a shadow, but drew on the magical force between the planes to become a place of power, an unhinged, arcane habitat that gave us the Eladrin, Dryads, Treants, and more. With such strength to break the boundaries and guidelines of creation, the plane itself was unstable, always on the verge of collapse. Once contact was made between the two planes, an accord was made to create a machine of dwarven craftsmanship. The sacrifice to keep the plane alive was unforgivable, but necessary to the plane's survival. To feed nature, to feed the wild, life must be exchanged from something of the same organic and natural power. They needed to feed nature with nature. That's when the Dryads lost their freedom. That's why every birth in the Feywild was a heartbreaking collision of hope and loss. Parents waiting to see if their newborn would be taken away to live and die in a factory, or raise a child in a world that could detonate at any second. You see, Dryads were seen as a blessing from the soil in the old days. The leader of the wild, a position known as the Mother Nature, was first held by a Dryad. She gave herself to the machine to power the plane for as long as she had life to live. It was a painful process that tore the life force from them, a brutal but necessary process. Not only did the wild create life forms and organic miracles, it also had unique flora with unique properties, used for trade with the mortal plane to create life-saving medicines or life-taking poisons. Both are useful, depending on the buyer. Through time, after the Dwarven Accords, the Mother Nature role was filled by Eladrin. Dryads were tracked down, and when one died off in the machine, they were replaced with volunteers, those willing to keep their world alive. Eventually, the numbers dwindled as some went into hiding to save themselves outside of the plane, where their magical prowess would be limited. Thanks and praise were heaped at those brave enough for the ultimate sacrifice, but sadly, Dryads were becoming a rarity. Which brings us many, many years into the future, where the last Dryad is dying, leaving the future of the Feywild in jeopardy. The inner halls glow with a cool bioluminescence emitted by a large floral growth from the ceiling of Eden, the massive house of honor for the Queen of the Feywild. Phaedra, a young Eladrin who has served in Eden as a first hand to the Queen, walks steadily towards a large elaborate doorway made of elegant tangles of vines and roots. She has a pin, a sigil of her standing in the royal court, a small twig with multiple blooms running along its edges, shaped like a Y. She approaches the door and she holds 2 fingers to her chin and speaks softly. The vines animate in part to let Phaedra into a main room where a large circular table is filled with the Queen's court. Eladrin, wood elves, satyrs, and fey-touched creatures sit in discussion across from a marvelous throne carved from oak and decorated with constantly blooming roses, whose colors shift according to the mood of the Queen who sits there now, listening. The petals turn from a dark purple to black.
Your Majesty, Draylin is concerned there is not a lot of time left as the Dryad gets weaker. We need to consider evacuating to the mortal plane. We were given assurances that we would be granted passage, an elder Eladrin says as he wrings his hands in desperation.
The satyr spits.
More subjects to their kingdom. No doubt they intend to put us among the cities to be watched. Not all from the seed plane have our best interest in mind. We don't even know how we would be affected outside of our realm that long. Maybe the magic dies. We know we are weaker in their environment.
A group of pixies quickly fly by the table and the Queen raises her eyes momentarily to follow them. A bearded short figure with leaves braided into his beard and hair with olive skin speaks up.
My Queen, the satyr interrupts. You see, even their ways have pushed us out of our traditions as we use their language to erase our history. We should not call the mother something as basic and limited as Queen.
The rose petals shift to a deep red. Vorktur, the old ways are what have put us in this mess. Something as small as a title does not need to get in the way of progress. Besides, I can be both. Please, continue, Treadlin. Treadlin glares at Vorktur and combs his beard with his hand.
My Queen, I do not envy your position, but fate has smiled on us thus far. I believe an answer will present itself if we hang tight. Emergency precautions can be taken. If the Feywild is destined to collapse, we make a safe exit before all is lost.
The elder Eladrin shakes his head.
We do not know what will happen when the Feywild breaks. It could happen in an instant, or it could happen in a year. We are betting on something that we have no knowledge of.
Phaedra approaches. Mother Silty, it is time. The roses shift to pastel pink that reflects the illumination from above and casts a small color of blush on Queen Silty's cheeks. She stands, revealing a large belly. She is with child, and straightens her robes. We will adjourn for now. Your counsel is always appreciated, and I must say you have all given me something to ponder. I think we will begin preparations for evacuation in case the worst happens. I will not let pride get in the way of the lives of our people. But we also will not give up hope. Please, on your exit, take a bloodroot and give them to your young ones as a gift from me. The council nods and stands as she exits with Phaedra. Once she clears the room, they make their way towards the exit. Phaedra, how long have you worked for me? Silty rests her right hand on her belly as Phaedra leads her down the hall by her left. Ever since I was a child, I helped my mother in the kitchens of Eden. It wasn't until she passed I became a member of the Core Order and assisted with timekeeping. Then for the past 50 years I have been your closest advisor. I fear your memory may be slipping away from you. Pregnancy can do that. Phaedra smiles and Silty chuckles and looks down as she feels a kick. I am not asking because I have forgotten. I am asking because I want to know what else you are looking for. You have served your whole life in Eden. Surely there must be a bigger dream in that young mind of yours. Phaedra sighs. My dream is to make sure that you are okay, and that you're making your appointments on time. You will need a hand when it comes to your future heir. Silty looks over into Phaedra's eyes. When this heir comes of age, the only thing I request of you is that you find a life that is your own. There will always be other advisors, but you only have one life. I cannot be queen forever. Sorry. The mother. I forgot you are an old soul. Phaedra looks ahead as they make their way to the queen's chamber, where a cleric is waiting for a checkup. They stop at the door. Phaedra asks without looking, "Think of a name yet?" The queen shakes her head. "When I see them, I will know." The cleric goes through his routine of prayer over the queen and small non-intrusive spells to ensure the safety of the child and the mother. He adjusts a pair of small glasses.
"Everything is looking fine. She is healthy. It really could be any day, so I should stay nearby just in case."
Phaedra smiles at the cleric. "A room has already been set for you, thank you." Silty sits up from the table.
"Ugh. Yes, thank you for everything, Fuis. I look forward to the day."
"I believe Hawith is just outside and will lead you to your room." He bows and walks out of the room as the queen turns to Phaedra. "I have an errand for you. This morning Draylin said he had an updated time frame from the machine. I think this is a good opportunity for you to meet with him and bring me back the information so we can make a plan with the council tomorrow." Phaedra's eyes go wide. "I don't like going to the factory. I'm not sure I want to. I have successfully avoided it for a decade." "Phaedra, after my daughter is born, you will need to do a little more to help. It doesn't hurt to get a first-hand view of why we make the decisions we do once in a while." "Of course, Mother Silty." Phaedra exits the halls of Eden and walks on the moss and cobblestone streets. An aurora shines above as children run through the street chasing fairies as they terrorize fruit carts in the square. A few patrons make their way towards the arborways after a day of trade. She takes a small path through various domiciles and walks through vines and gnarled forests that sway and dance. The plants here seem to sense their freedom until a pathway opens, and looming over a deeply thicketed valley is a large dwarven structure. Flecks of green light shoot up from a rectangular hatch and a distant hiss. They sparkle and shimmer as they spread and blend into the colorful sky. She continues and makes her way up an overgrown walking path and arrives at a heavy steel door. Her knocks create a cold and hollow echo of steel that bounces around the interior of the factory, as well as fades into the wilderness outside. A pale Eladrin with sunken eyes and thin hair opens the door. "May I help you?" the Eladrin asks dryly. Phaedra straightens up. "I come on behalf of the Mother Nature Queen Silty. She requires information on if there have been changes to the Dryad's condition, and if you have an updated timetable of survival. You must be Draylin Tishanul." He nods. "My name is Phaedra Rasp." "A pleasure, Miss Rasp. Please come in. It has been some time since I last had visitors." Phaedra follows Draylin into the factory as they move through large, emptied rooms and oppressive catacombs. He stops at a massive reinforced door. "If you have never seen the process this facility was built for, I warn you, it is not for the faint of heart. In these doors, there is only necessity." Phaedra nods and Draylin opens the door. The room is circular and massive, with a cylinder of translucent crystal stretching hundreds of feet up and through the ceiling. Draylin moves to his right and steps up on a small dais where some instruments and switches stick out of a semicircle desk. Draylin takes a few scrolls and partially unrolls them, looking over notes and recent analysis. "The Queen cannot expect exact numbers. This is not an exact practice. We are not measuring alchemical properties and temperatures. We are measuring will and time. Who knows when either will run out?" "So, you don't have anything for me?" Draylin re-rolls the parchment and puts it under the desk into a partially filled cubby. "Maybe 6 months. Things change, but at this point, judging from the struggle when it is lucid, I would feel confident in this estimation." Phaedra looks Draylin over. His face is expressionless as he looks into the crystal cylinder through a green fog. He looks almost devoid of emotion. She turns and stares into the fog, sharpening her eyes. A motionless heap of a skeletal body lays shrouded in a torrent of green smoke as flecks of shimmering light rise up to a grate at the top of the chamber. Phaedra fights back a look of disgust. Do you feel anything for them? No. It is fuel. Nothing more. Nothing less. Draylin rotates a large dwarven dial to the left, and a hiss of exhaust can be heard as it is released in an unseen chamber used to power the plane. Phaedra looks at Draylin with a withering stare. How can you say that? How can you feel nothing about May? I remind you, Phaedra. Draylin cuts her off and takes 2 steps closer to her and stares deep into her eyes. I have worked to continue the research of those who came before me. 50 years of my life force have been sacrificed, day in, day out, to ensure this machine works correctly. That this machine keeps us alive. You don't know the screams, pleading, bargaining, and curses that I have heard directed at my colleagues and I. You stay with the Queen and sleep in a silent bed with thoughts of parties to plan next, or what agendas to pursue, a luxury that is not afforded to me. That is how I feel nothing. That is why this machine was invented. If it is going to keep us and our world alive, it needs fuel. Nothing more, nothing less. Draylin's intense stare softens as he turns around and twists the dial again, as a mechanism closes loudly up above. Phaedra steals a look at Draylin as she gathers her things in silence. The tension hangs in the room before Phaedra speaks again. I will tell the mother we have maybe half a year. Draylin continues looking at the cylinder. Of course, if you need anything, you know where to find me. 3 weeks pass, and the halls of Eden are filled with running footsteps as servants and the council are running through the halls. Council members are arguing about new decrees and how to best implement them. Servants hold buckets of water. They are rushing, trying not to spill into the Queen's bedchamber. The bedchamber doors spring open and yells of pain explode out of the doorway. 3 clerics stand at the foot of the bed. The Queen, Silty, is in labor. Phaedra, next to her, holding her hand as her knuckles turn white and she pushes.
My queen, you will be able to hold your daughter soon enough. Just keep pushing and remember to breathe.
Phaedra leans in. You are so close, Mother Silty. Remember, once this is over, you can have them all killed. Silty coughs out a chuckle. Don't make me laugh, Phaedra. Fuck! Phaedra looks towards the clerics with a smile on her face. They smile back.
My queen, we are starting to see the head.
Phaedra looks at Silty, and through the sweat and tears, Silty's look of joy and anticipation starts to make Phaedra's eyes water. She looks back at the clerics and freezes. Their smiles and excitement are gone, replaced with stern, sharp faces, pale, like the blood was sucked out of them. Silty yells out, Phaedra, can you see her? She turns and looks at the Queen with a faltering smile. Not yet. Not... Silty lets out one last scream and collapses in relief as tears run down her face. She starts to laugh to herself. Let me see her. Let me see her. She tries to brace herself on her elbows to see her daughter, but stops when she sees Phaedra's expressionless face, full of sadness. Is she okay? Silty whispers. She can hear a faint cry and her heart leaps. She forces herself up and sees Cleric Fuis holding a pale green child. Small organic leaves lay randomly on her skin like scales, and Silty's face drops. The cleric speaks. My queen, it seems like some prayers were answered. Silty's mouth runs dry as she speaks softly. But none were mine. Phaedra looks between the two. Mother Silty, what can I do? What do we do? The Queen's face hardens as she stares at her child. Take it away. Fuis closes his eyes. We should talk about what this... We will talk about nothing, Fuis. It will be protected and guarded away from Eden until the time comes. The Feywild has provided a solution to our predicament, and we will not waste a blessing such as this. Everyone, leave. You as well, Phaedra. I want to be alone. Phaedra slowly walks with 2 clerics toward the exit. Fuis still stands holding the baby at the foot of the bed. A name, my queen? Silty lays back on the bed and folds her hands on her stomach. Leave. Fuis turns and leaves while Phaedra holds the door open. She pauses and takes her exit, closing the door behind her. She follows the clerics through the hall, as servants and council members stand in a row waiting. Seeing the child, some collapse into tears, others bow their heads in prayer, thinking of the future. The only thing going through Phaedra's mind is the pain and sadness the Mother Nature must be feeling, but there is no scream of anguish from her bedchamber. Just ominous silence. Cleric Fuis. Phaedra quickens her pace to catch up to the man. Fuis, where are you taking her? Fuis looks straight ahead. To the facility. The child will be taken care of there. Phaedra puts her hand on his shoulder. The facility? This child is the future of the wild. Have you lost your mind? The facility is equipped to harbor dryads of any age to prepare them for their destiny. Phaedra moves to stand in front of him. Bullshit. This child is not just a dryad. She is the mother's daughter and heir to the throne she will never see. Her time will not be in a cold cell. Leave her with me. Phaedra, the queen wants the child away from Eden. If they are found here, that would mean you have gone against her word. You would be fired, or worse. I don't care. Her life doesn't have to be lived being neglected and treated as fuel. Fuis looks at her and looks around at the crowd of people around the halls. No. Queen's orders. He grumbles loudly and barrels past her. Phaedra watches silently as they disappear around a corner. Queen Silty stayed in her room the rest of the day as Eden darkened and everyone was getting ready to rest in their rooms. Phaedra made her way to the queen's bedchamber. She knocks quietly a few times, and when there is no answer, she turns and makes her way back to her bed. After settling down and nearly falling asleep, she is jolted awake with a knock on her door. A Furbolg Eden guard is standing at attention. He salutes and says, In honor of the mother. Phaedra closes her robes a little tighter and does her best to speak formally. In honor of the mother, how can I be of service? The guard relaxes a little. Cleric Fuis is here, he says. After today's events, he has brought a gift of rare delicacies for you to enjoy and brighten your spirits. He gave me a radish mint roll. It was excellent. Phaedra smiles sleepily. That's great. You can send him in, I guess. The guard leaves, and moments later, Cleric Fuis enters Phaedra's room. It is cluttered with family trinkets and pictures, drawings of dramatic landscapes and ferocious creatures, books and vases from a variety of ages and a variety of design styles. They line the walls and are stacked on top of each other on the floor. The cleric sets a large basket on the bed and removes the hood of his cloak. I see you enjoy more than the standard regal way of living. Phaedra ignores the comment and says, Fuis, you are keeping me from rest. It has been a long and exhausting day. Tell me your business and go, please. Fuis sighs and grabs the basket, removing a woven blanket from the top. Inside sits the dryad child. Fuis, what are you doing? He smiles. You were right. She doesn't deserve a lifetime in the facility. She should experience some care and tenderness before the unthinkable. I couldn't agree to this with so many witnesses. We are both being put in a bad situation. So once I leave this room, it is in your hands. I will deny knowledge of this moment. But before I go, I have to have your word. Phaedra lifts the child and holds her cradled in her arms. What do you mean by my word? The child coos and squeaks as it shuffles around in her small blanket.
that you know what to do when the time comes. No matter what, this child is the only thing that can save our world and our people. One life to save countless others. The first Mother Nature was a dryad and knew the cost. This little one does not, and is not in a position to make that choice on her own. When the day comes, you must let me take her for the greater good. Phaedra looks up from the child. Of course, Fuis. I have served Silti and Eden for my entire life. That means I serve the Feywild as well. You have my word. Cleric Fuis nods and turns, opening the door. You may also want to clean up a bit. You have more than yourself to take care of now. And he smiles. The door closes and Phaedra looks back at the baby. It's okay, little one. I'll make sure what time you have is lived like the princess you were born to be. A small fist reaches up and opens. Tiny fingers extend and clasp around Phaedra's finger. And Phaedra's eyes roll back instantly and her body becomes rigid. An immense surge of arcane chaos flows through her body. She remembers the smoke and skeletal frame in the crystal cylinder. Draylin overlooking emotionless, spinning dials and pulling levers. She snaps out of it and is breathless. She looks around the room to regain her composure and looks down at the baby. She is silent still, holding onto her finger and staring deeply into her eyes as a little toothless mouse opens and closes, making small grunts and squeals. You are quite powerful, little one. Quite different. A tear rolls down Phaedra's cheek as she smiles. She kisses the child's forehead and sits on the bed rocking her until her eyes close. The spark of love was ignited that night in the heart of a queen's servant, a spark that would eventually destroy an entire plane of existence. Phaedra Rasp and River Song sit in a crowd of druids, sharing a meal together in Ferabast while outside passers-by stop and give blessing to a soon-to-bloom arborway. We see the faintest hint of a bulb sticking out from the other barren branches of the tree. And we now cross dimensions and planes into the dark. Rotted and wilted wilderness stretch for miles until we see a dark shadow. Adjusting to the dark, we see vines covering a large dwarven structure, overrun by decayed flora. Through the windows we see empty and decrepit halls until a source of light exits an abandoned sleeping quarter. A blue wisp moves and glides through the building, making its way through a cracked open doorway back into the dead forest where it fades and disappears.